All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are excited to be here. First of all, let me know if my audio and video messes up. We've been having some power and internet issues over
Your
here.
video is already granulated, Chris, but we'll have fun with it.
If I'm not working, you need to take over.
Okay, well, why don't you kick it off? It looks like you're clear, and then after that, we'll Alonzo and I'll take over if need be.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think Alonzo
Okay,
and I are already going to be
I
taking
guess
over. So,
there we go.
welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to have a discussion on servers versus serverless. And the whole point of this discussion is to truly help you in your architecture career understand when serverless is good, when serverless is not good, when serverless is a great architectural choice, when serverless is the worst architectural choice you can make, when serverless will be cheaper, when serverless will be more expensive, and how you should really think about these things in the context of what you're going to design for your customers. Because, we've reached a point where you're seeing cloud repatriation everywhere. And what is cloud repatriation? It's people realizing that they spent too much money on the cloud, and now they're going back to the data center, building private clouds and hybrid clouds, just like I told everybody they would be doing years ago. And that's why every student at Go Cloud Careers builds a private cloud, designs hybrid clouds, multi-clouds, and everywhere in between. Because if you had any business acumen, and the people do, you understand how and where cloud computing is cheaper, how and where it's more expensive, and how and where cloud computing is transformational for your organizations. And the cloud's not going anywhere. We cloud architects love the cloud. We enterprise architects also love the cloud. And it's going to be a fun discussion tonight. Chris, your video is clear now. I think you probably shut off
All
all
right,
your
good. I was about
equipment.
to cut you off and say you're getting too serious here, Mike. We got to have fun. All right.
Process
So
is. So Chris, take it
we're,
over.
we're back. We are back. We've been gone. We've had a couple of workshops that we did on Tuesdays for y'all. Then we had 4th of July, but we are excited to be back. Like Mike said, we're going to be talking about server versus serverless. And in particular, the benefits and the pros and cons of serverless, and probably some myths and some misunderstandings about serverless. So it's going to be a great conversation. It's going to be a fun conversation. But what I want to do is I want everybody to tell us where you are from in the chat box. We love to know wherever. See, Douglas already beat me to it as I'm saying it, and Barara already said it. So we got Raleigh, North Carolina in here. We got Maryland, USA in here. We got Hull, UK in here. Tyrone is from Cape Town. Oh, that's why everybody beat me to it. He's already asked him. Tyrone said, "Where's everybody from?" So yeah, we got Chicago, Canada, Katy, Texas. Although you're not in Katy right now, but yeah. So we're having all kinds of all kinds of we're having all kinds of fun. So the we got Alonzo, who is at college orientation of all places right now. We have me, who's working out of his house because AC is out at his office, and I was dealing with power and internet outages all day today. And we got Mike. Mike is the only person that's where he's supposed to be. Mike is right where he's supposed to be.
Well, let's clarify. I'm not going to college. My daughter is going to college. So
Right, right.
I have had enough of college to last me a lifetime.
So yeah, that's if it seems like we're a little out of sorts, it's because we are. But that's what this is about. We're here to have fun. Let our hair down a little bit. Although I got my hair cut. For those of you that might have noticed, I appreciate it. For those of you that didn't, well, this is how it's supposed to look. Um, but anyway, like I said, we're talking server versus serverless. But before we start the discussion, I do want to tell everybody a couple of things that we've got going on. So this Thursday, we're going to have an information session about our new training program, our Elite Cloud Architect training program. So this builds on our award-winning cloud architects training, but also adds in weekend and evening training opportunities on top of the 3 live classes a week that are already and a part of the Cloud Architect Career Development Program. So we're going to be talking all about this training program. This training program, it will be limited. There's only a few slots left. It starts next week. So we're going to do an information session this Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Tyrone's got the link over there in the chat box. The link is also in the description. If you want to learn all about this and secure your spot, please join us this Thursday. We're going to talk about everything that's included, and we're going to take your questions for an extended period of time. It's going to be on Zoom, so you can talk to us. You can come off mute, you can come on camera, you can do whatever you want. Use the chat box, but we want to do it on Zoom so that we can actually have a conversation with you and answer your questions in a real conversation, and not just through chat box like we do here on YouTube. We love YouTube, but YouTube doesn't allow the most intimate and immediate answering of questions and intimate conversations. So that's why we're doing that over there on Zoom for you all. So next, make sure you get your free how to get your first cloud architect job guide. That is a great starting point for anybody that is interested in becoming a cloud architect or solutions architect and doesn't know where to start. So free resource, completely free. Did I mention free? It's free information from somebody, from Mike and our team. We've got decades of experience with this. So make sure you get that free resource for yourself and take advantage of that information that's in there. So I wanted to take an opportunity to mention all of those before we get into our show for tonight. Mike has already had an opportunity to say a few words. I was going to ask Alonzo if he wants to say a few words, but it looks like he's having some difficulties. He's on the road, not in his normal environment, so I can appreciate those difficulties. So let's just get straight into it, Mike. Before we get really deep, there's Alonzo. All right. Alonzo, you want to share any words before we get started, before I ask Mike the big question?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Everyone, it is always good to be back on Head in the Clouds with these gentlemen, be able to get in our natural and current and casual environment, just talking about the cloud. So, yeah, strap in. Let's get ready. Let's jump back in. Good to be back. Let's get to you, Mike.
All right. Mike, what is serverless? Yeah. That is the big question. You are muted. Live TV, everybody.
Sorry, I was looking for my mouse. I'm in my rec room as opposed to my main office. So
Cindy can help you find the mouse, I'm sure.
Oh, my cat Cindy finds me a mouse, and she brought me this like 3-foot lizard yesterday. It was so big I was actually scared looking at it. But that's neither here nor there.
Where's my hold on. Yeah, got the jokes.
So, serverless is a made-up marketing term from the cloud providers. It's an environment where you upload whatever you code you developed, and it runs on their servers. So it is not serverless by any stretch of the imagination. Serverless is a made-up, silly buzzword. Now, people like it because you just upload your code, and it works. Kind of like if you went to McDonald's and you ordered a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke. You get a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing with serverless. You get a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke. You don't get anything fancy. You lose control. You lose security. You lose performance. There's all kinds of... But if you want a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke, McDonald's is the greatest thing ever. And there are times where serverless is unbelievably good and agile and wonderful. And there are times where it's the wrong architectural decision. And we'll get in a little bit into cloud cost management and some of those other critical things we need to throughout the night. Because, FinOps, which is coming out, is a made-up discipline to take care of bad architecture. So I come from medicine, and there's 2 ways you can take care of somebody. You can tell somebody, don't smoke 10 packs of cigarettes a day, don't eat butter for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and don't eat all the bad foods in the world, and then they don't get a heart attack. Or they can get a heart attack, and I can say, here's some medicine for you. That's what FinOps is. FinOps is you've messed up, and now how do you control your cloud costs? Now, the reality is we're always going to need FinOps, just like we're always going to need doctors to treat diseases. But better for a doctor to present a disease. And if the architect has the right level of business acumen, they will know when to use FinOps. They will know when to use serverless, when to use a private cloud, when to use a hybrid cloud, when to use a multi-cloud, when to use the super cloud, which is about as good as it gets, and help the people. So serverless is just an environment for you not to have to worry about server management. Now, I'm going to talk about serverless in 2 contexts. Now, there's the context of serverless where it's like a Lambda function or an AMDA or or an Azure function where basically you just write a little code and it does something minimal. And that's traditionally when we talk about serverless or event-driven architectures, what we're talking about. But there's all this other serverless stuff. For example, I can have a Kubernetes cluster and I can stick my containers on a virtual machine like we do in the data center, and we have for the last, I don't know, 5-10 years. Or we can stick our containers in like an AWS Fargate, which is, again, another server platform where they host your containers. And what people like about serverless is they say, you don't have to think about capacity. And to a degree, that's true. If you just put it there, it will size up and it will size down. And you don't have to think so much about the scaling up and scaling down. But if you don't plan your capacity ahead of time, you may find out you're just like Amazon and it's 9 times more expensive to run serverless than it is to run servers. If you do your capacity planning ahead of time and you know what you're doing, guess what? You'll be able to choose the right one, and serverless could be 3 times cheaper or 5 times cheaper too, based upon your specific use case. And if you don't do the analysis, and part of that is capacity planning, resource utilization, how it'll be used, when it'll be used, and why it'll be used, then really it's like throwing a bunch of mud on the wall and hoping to see what sticks. And the reality is, I don't like hope as a management strategy. Imagine picking your stocks. Here, let me just find these. They all begin with the letter A. Well, you know, when somebody gets an AWS certification and they're all excited about serverless, or they talk to a serverless advocate who basically says, serverless, 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 they end up throwing the mud on the wall and seeing what sticks. And sometimes they found out that it was so expensive they want to leave the cloud because the cost is ridiculous. And sometimes they find out it was the best thing they ever did. I don't like hope as a management strategy. So that's kind of the basis. Serverless is a way for you not to think about where your stuff is stored, not to think about the underlying server hardware, not to think about patching the underlying server hardware, not to think about any of it.
Okay, that sounds great, Mike. I'm thinking that you defined it and you shared with us what serverless is. What are the upticks? What are the positives of going with serverless? And then we'll talk about the negatives right behind that.
The positives are if you don't have good cloud architects, meaning you don't have somebody that knows the network in the data center, and all you have is software developers, you can just stick your code in serverless and it's going to work. So that's the upside. The upside, it is much less overhead to manage these environments because you don't have to think about packaging the operating system, for example.
So if you got a team of nothing but me, serverless is great.
If you don't have any tech people on your team other than a development team, which is in another country, and you don't have data center people and networking people, serverless is great. What's also good about serverless, and also so bad about serverless, is you pay every time the serverless function is run.
Mm-hmm.
Which means if you have an application that's very sporadic, it's cheaper to pay as you run a function than it would be to manage a server if you don't use it a lot. I like to use the Uber example. You know, I have friends that live in New York City. They take the subway everywhere, or they walk everywhere, or they take an Uber. For them in New York City, parking is $40 a day for their car.
Yeah.
And then they have to buy the car. And it might be cheaper for somebody in New York to spend $20 a day on Uber than it is to have a car. Now go to Houston where Alonzo lives. And everything is 15 to 30 minutes away. And if he has to go to 5 places in one day and he tried to get there via Uber, Alonzo would have a $5,000 bill. But guess what? Where Alonzo lives in Katy, Texas, there is no parking fees. Car insurance is super low. And it might cost him $800 to buy the car or lease the car and pay for his insurance and maybe $1,000 with gas. And it might cost him $5-10 grand to use Uber. So it's all based on the use case. Now, because it's just, you don't have to think about where stuff is, you don't have to think about security with serverless as much. But for anybody that's ever had a Windows PC that automatically updates itself, do any of you guys think that's it? The vendor's managing your security? Do you feel confident on your Windows PC? Tell you what, if you do, I recommend you plug your PC directly into the internet, Don't put any third-party software. Don't sit behind a firewall and see how fast your identity is stolen. Within an hour, you've been hacked. Now,
wait, you mean I'm supposed to put like stuff on my computer when I connect to the internet?
exactly.
Oh,
So, you compare that to a business, then, or like what I have in my house. First, I've got a next generation firewall. Actually, I've got two of them behind a load balancer. Then I've got routers that have an access list on my subnet. Then I've got my systems where I've disabled all the unnecessary services because Windows and Mac have too many services. I then have a host-based firewall on it, a host-based IDS IPS that actually signals my other host-based IDS IPS system, and I put some anti-malware protection. So serverless, you don't have any control. You got to just hope it's secure, just like your PC. Again, we're going back to hope as a management strategy. And those are the things that are pretty nice about serverless. Is it's just so simple and elegant. It really is. You don't have to think about it. Imagine not thinking about the size of your containers, not thinking about the storage or any of these other things, not thinking about your servers. It's kind of nice. Not thinking about patching your systems, kind of nice. Not thinking about the underlying networking, kind of nice. In fact, we use a platform that's hosted by AWS, and not our platform. Our platform is all multi-cloud, but our content management platform is outsourced. It's a SaaS application to AWS. Now, our content management platform had horrible architects. It's on a single cloud. Do you know how I know when AWS goes down? My students send me about 50 emails. Hey, I can't access systems. I can't access this. And then sure enough, it's because AWS is down. Now, if they were more interested in managing their tech, and half was in AWS and half was in Azure, AWS would go down, DNS would reroute everybody to Azure, and I wouldn't get 50 emails every time AWS has a hiccup. So there's that. Now, you want to talk about the downsides or just the upsides?
Both. Let us have it. Full bag.
Are there any other possible upsides to servers that
They're your main upsides, that it's simple, it's elegant, and there's nothing to manage. So what I do like about serverless is if you don't have the right tech people in your company, you can think just about developing your applications and nothing else. Now, I'm a person that loves focus. And enabling your people to only focus on running your business and your applications and not thinking about the underlying tech is kind of elegant. The question is, in 2023, is tech, should any business not have tech as a competency to run their business successfully in the world? And I think the answer is no. With artificial intelligence, with cloud, with security, if you're a real business in today's world, you must know how to manage your own tech, because tech is a competitive advantage. And if you rely on something that's just there in this cookie cutter McDonald's, Big Mac fries, and a Coke environment, guess what? You're not going to be at the bleeding edge of anything, because you're going to be dependent upon the Big Mac fries and a Coke versus going to Morton's, telling them you want some USDA prime beef, grind them up, and have that chef make you your hamburger any way you want it. So there's that.
Okay, I gotta say, so I mentioned I'm working from home. All right, like, I'm not at the office, but you know what my wife is doing in the background? She is cooking shrimp and grits from scratch. All right, so you keep talking about French fries, and I keep getting the smell of bacon and grits and everything.
Chris is going to have a visual malfunction. Really.
Yeah, you're gonna have a breakdown here in a second, and it's just gonna be you and Alonzo. All right, so I love the McDonald's French fries, Big Mac, and a Coke, but there's a downside to continuing to reference that. I love McDonald's French fries, so it is only 2 blocks away from my house.
That's a good point. I haven't had a French fry in 25 years, so I never think about it. And I haven't had fast food. And well, that's not true. I did get a black coffee at a McDonald's on the way to the orthopedic surgeon a month ago.
Well, hey, I will say McDonald's has good coffee,
and the coffee was pretty good.
They have good coffee. I will say that. Anyway, sorry, I had to digress.
No,
you kept talking about fries, and I'm like, hold on now, we gotta.
So let's get into the downsides of serverless. The biggest one is, there was a song, Hotel California. You can check in anytime you want, but you can never leave. Well, when you use serverless, if you go from your monolith to a serverless thing, and you spend millions and millions of dollars to refactor your application, now you made some proprietary thing that works just in AWS or just in Azure. Now, when your costs go too high and you want to bring it back to your data center, Now you're going to spend millions more to get out of the solution. So that's why you have to figure out why. So serverless promotes vendor lock-in, and any true innovation requires open standards. Look what happened with servers and Linux. They were the first people to be open. Now, 90% of the world runs on Linux from a server perspective because it's open. Serverless architectures often rely on proprietary services and platforms. So it makes it very challenging to really create any kind of high availability or high performance system. Next is limited control with serverless. Serverless is based on developers that know how to write code. And that you don't have any underlying control over it. So when I talked about creating a super secure environment, you get what they give you. Now let's talk about performance. If you're using serverless and you use it very sporadically, it's cheaper. But then you get what's called cold start. The serverless of these event-driven architectures only run in response to something. So what happens is something kicks in a serverless function, and now you've got latency called the cold start. And that level of latency can introduce delays. And if you've got a real-time application or a latency-sensitive application, it's going to work horrible. Unless, with serverless, it runs constantly, nonstop. And if it runs constantly and nonstop, it's like that Uber example where you're spending a ton of money taking Ubers back and forth all day long. So it's either going to be poor performance or it's going to be pretty expensive in most cases. Now, let's talk about monitoring and debugging stuff. On a server, it's nothing. On a Linux machine, you run the top command, you see a process that went haywire, you do a kill -p or -9, I don't know, I'm not a sysadmin. You kill the process, you restart the process, and Bob's your uncle. Boom. With this, you've got no access to any control. So debugging and monitoring becomes much less effective. Cost management. If you use serverless a lot, it's prohibitively expensive. If you use serverless on a limited basis, now it's very cheap, but then you've got that. So that's a resource limitation. In my data center or my private cloud, if I need a low latency application, from Dell, I can get these beautiful new servers with 2 epic 128 core CPU processors. I could pack that thing with 6-8 terabytes of DRAM, and I can get a 19 million IOPS RAID array, which sits in a card for about $100,000. And now for about $400,000, I got a system that can scream. And there's nothing that we could do for less than $1 million a month in the cloud that would equal that performance. And that's a virtual machine in the cloud. Now, serverless, we don't have anywhere near those room limitations. So most cloud providers have memory and execution limits on their functions. And the reality is, serverless, which is designed to be easy, starts getting pretty darn complex when you got to think about which endpoint has to touch the which all over the cloud provider's network. And then what happens when one part of the cloud provider's network fails? Planning around those failures can get pretty complicated too. So infrequently used, awesome. Frequently used, not so much. Now, there are times where serverless just makes sense on any cloud provider. And everybody should probably use them. So 16% of all hacking attacks in the cloud occur from misconfigured S3 buckets. 16%. And then we'll get on to the next question. Just think, if you can set up a Lambda function or an Azure function, the next time somebody in your company makes an object public that needs to be private, to be able to use a Lambda function or an Azure function for remediation, that's a slam dunk that every organization should include, those event-driven architectures to prevent problems. But in everything else, it's going to be truly a case-by-case basis.
So you started to go here, Mike, and I think it's a natural next place to go is, so what are some examples of when serverless is appropriate, when serverless would be best for use case? Because as you mentioned there towards the end in the last answer, that it's there are certain cases where serverless is the only option or the best way to go? What are some of those cases?
So if I want to build an event-driven architecture for security, something happens and I want something else to occur, serverless is amazing. Syslog message does something in a firewall, and I want that to basically generate a message and send it to like an SNS and then page everybody that matters. Serverless is beautiful. It's simple and elegant. And why? You're not going to be running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's Alonso from my team made something public and he wasn't supposed to. Fix it on demand. So that's really good. Now, what about like these multi-step workflow things? Upload a video, maybe something else renders the video with a different codec and something else transcribes the video. And we can set up those little mini functions for workflows. I mean, that is just beautiful. I mean, if you really think about it, it's so simple and elegant. That's a slam dunk. So for those cases, I think it always matters. But, you know, there are times where companies are just, they have such little use of an application in these weird, wacky applications that are going to pop up once in a while. If this, then this. You know, that's truly transformational. And I absolutely love those serverless functions for that. Now, I don't want to make a serverless website if I'm going to get traffic on it. I don't want to do that. And I don't want to put my databases on serverless either. I want control over my databases in most cases. Now, if I don't have the right staff, then I'm thinking serverless makes sense all the time for a lot of these things until I can hire the right staff. Maybe it's a startup. Let's say your startup is an application developer who's writing code. They don't know anything about networking. They don't know anything about data centers. They don't know anything about cloud, but they can code. Maybe they made some new cool app. Now they stick it in the cloud. They wrote the code themselves. It's a new business. They don't have any business. Let it run periodically. And as soon as that business starts to generate money and starts doing things, refactor that application and put it on a server. But it could be a really simple and elegant way to do things. Or it's just an app that doesn't run that often. In which case, go cheaper. Go serverless. Serverless is cheaper.
Before you get too far down this road, you mentioned something. I want to tie this back to something that Alonzo said in the chat box here, and that you mentioned earlier. So Alonzo, I love Alonzo's comment here from The Godfather. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. So you mentioned if you're a startup and you don't have, and you've got this great idea, you've got this great thing that you created, you put it on serverless, and then boom, you get your $200 million from a venture capitalist, and boom, you're good to go. You're flush with cash all of a sudden. Refactor. What are some, like, I'm trying to get out of this situation. I've gone serverless. I'm locked in now. What's that like? How difficult is that? Because I hear from, again, for those of you that aren't aware, I'm not a tech person. I'm the operations officer here. I'm a business guy. So I don't know the answer to this question I'm about to ask. But I've been part of our lessons and part of our conversations with students and clients that is a daunting task or a costly task or something that you have to be prepared for, because it's not going to be easy. Am I correct in that, Mike?
Let's say you bought a house and it was terrible, and you brought in a wrecking ball to knock it down so you can build a new house. Think of it that way. You basically have to start over and code it again. So not optimal in that particular case, but let's think about it in another way. So Spotify, right? Spotify came and was grown kind of like almost overnight. It's still losing money. It's never made money, despite Daniel Ek being one of the richest people in the world from founding it. But it's still losing money. It's hemorrhaging money terribly. If they have so much cash flow coming in and they don't mind hemorrhaging money, and they want to still focus on get better, grow their audience, it might still make sense for them to spend money or waste money on serverless so they can focus on their business under those auspices. But let's take the converse of that. What about an established business that's got a great application running in their data center? and they want to migrate to the cloud. Now, they need to really think, before I spend $5 million or $50 million refactoring this critical application of my business to go to the cloud, what is the utilization? Now, if they've got an old application that's buggy and it has problems, and they want to go to some more cloud native environment to be more agile, and agility is worth something and it's worth spending money for. And now they're looking at it and they're like, okay, it's $25 million to recode this application, but our past application is pretty terrible anyway. We want something that's more simple and elegant that we're going to think about. Then maybe it still makes sense. But that company that's got that monolith that's running there, or that application running, or tiered application running the way it is, that knows that thing's running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's on 50 servers and they can't keep up with the servers, buy more servers or go to the cloud and use auto scaling, because they're going to convert that and they're going to find out that they're going to get that first bill from the cloud and they're going to go, oh my God, I can't afford this.
Yeah.
Who can we lay off? That's what they're going
to
do. I don't want to see anybody getting laid off.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, imagine a serverless monolith. What type of detail, what type of observation, what type of remediation is needed for those type of structures?
But it's like anything else. And I think a lot of what's going on is, and why you keep hearing serverless, Chris is talking to a mute button.
You thought I was frozen, but no, my wife sent me a
Chris is
sends me a picture over here, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Oh,
so that's why you had me over here staring off in like La La Land, and I'm just like, oh
yeah, I'm
sorry about that.
I'm kind of hungry. I planned my lunch. I made my salad. I'm down to my last 8-ounce pack of Boar's Head turkey my wife got for me before she left. I'm on the kitchen table trying to cut my stuff, and all of a sudden I see my little furry friend licking my turkey and eating my turkey, and I'm like, all right, this is so.
The Brad Cat strikes again.
Yeah, so that's why I looked like I was frozen, because I was just sitting here like, okay, I gotta get this shrimp and grits out of my head. But and here she is. She's sending me another one. Stop. She says, "What can I say?" Okay, yeah. What can you say?
And you can see it with anybody that's been in the cloud. The first people were going to say the cloud is cheaper. It's cheaper. It's cheaper. It's cheaper. And then when companies found out it wasn't cheaper, they said, if you go serverless, it'll be cheaper. And then you got the cloud provider themselves that's getting off of serverless because it's too expensive. Look, let's actually be real. The reality is cloud computing is the most agile form of computing in the world, whether it's a private cloud or public cloud. We've got near unlimited scalability, and you don't need as many. And I used to be one of those egghead CCIEs that was really deep in networking. You don't need that many people. But here's some interesting metrics for you. People keep asking about what's the difference. So let's say a company has a small data center and they need 1,000 virtual machines, just 1,000. No big deal. Companies I work with have 100,000 or 200,000, even 1 million. But let's just say you need 1,000 virtual machines. That's going to be the average size company. If you go to Dell and pay retail, which nobody would do in business, but let's just assume you did, for $320,000, you can get a PowerEdge R7625 server that's going to have 256 physical cores of the latest CPU that was just made by AMD, 4 terabytes of DRAM, and 64 terabytes of SSD drives. Now, with that, to put it into context, we can make...
That was a lot of information.
Yeah, I want to be specific when we go over calculations. With that, we can, assuming we don't oversubscribe, and cloud providers oversubscribe, but we're not going to oversubscribe because we want much better performance than our cloud provider could give us. From that one $320,000 server, we can get 64 8-core servers with 64 gigs of RAM and a terabyte 1,000 IOPS drive, which is nothing, but I mean, compared to AWS. Now, we need 16 of those servers to get to 1,000, assuming we don't oversubscribe, and the cost is a little less than $5 million. Add $1 million for networking and security gear, and add $1 million for $2 million a year to maintain it, And now we're basically, for the cost of 5 years, 10 million in maintenance and 6 million in servers. And that's all your staff to run it. Now, if you actually get 1,000 R6G.2XL extra larges on AWS with 1,000 with 1 terabyte in the same 10,000 ILPS volumes, it was 10,000, not 1,000. What we're dealing with on AWS is, and this is not counting any data transfer charges or all those other fees and CloudWatch fees and anything else from getting frequent polling, is $780,000 a month per server, per actual server that we're dealing with. And it turns out to be that we're dealing with $38 million over 5 years to host it in the AWS cloud. So $2 million of staff for 5 years is 10 million. And add another 6 million in hardware, it's 16 million versus 38 million. Now, why did I use that example? Because here I had a customer that needed very high performance computing. Very high performance computing. And it's cheaper for them to build a Nutanix cloud or an OpenStack cloud. And then when they need the agility, scale out in the cloud and add capacity burst. And do it with 3 clouds while they're at it. And do these things. So, and it all matters, but you have to run the analysis, which is why as an architect, certification teaches you 2% of it, but as it doesn't teach you how to design the right solution, it doesn't teach you the business behind how do you analyze the costs to advise your customers, and it doesn't teach you digital transformation either. If you need that, you got to think. So I don't want you to think I don't like serverless. I do. And I don't want you to think I don't like cloud computing. I do. I have a cloud running in my house with 10 servers. And it cost me less to buy the servers than 1 month in AWS did. Now, why is that? I don't need to hire a $300,000 CCIE because I am one. I had some extra firewalls from Cisco sitting around because they asked me to test them. And I had some extra Cisco switches that one of their product marketing people a few years ago sent to me so I could test them. So for me, it was nothing. But each one would be a case-by-case basis. Now, if there wasn't a CCIE living in the house, if I didn't have to buy those firewalls and switches, it'd still be cheaper to build my own cloud, but it wouldn't be that much cheaper. And then you start thinking about, but I like running my own cloud. I like the performance. I like the control.
So there's a question from Leo that ties right into this. So Leo says, what are the drivers that position server over serverless in the scenario or business case that's presented?
Higher performance? Oh, sorry.
In general, what should be considered?
If you need higher performance, don't use serverless. If you need maximum security, don't use serverless. If you need extreme control, don't use serverless. And if your systems run all day, every day at a high level, don't use serverless. And if you have high availability requirements, meaning 99.999% or greater, don't use serverless. And here's the reason why. You can't get a truly high available system on a single cloud. I know in your certification, they'll say for 99.99% availability, use 2 availability zones. And for 5 nines availability, use 2 availability zones and 2 regions. For anybody that believes that, not only do I have some great swampland to sell you in Florida that is worth $18 million per acre, but I'd like you to see which cloud provider has actually delivered 5 nines availability in the last 3 years. Find me one. In fact, find me a cloud provider that delivered 4 nines availability in the last 2 years. Now, Azure tells you they've been hacked. AWS has impaired networking gear. I don't know, maybe a router and a switch went to a bar and had some scotch. They have power failures. I've never seen a power failure in a data center in my life because you have 2 power companies and multiple transformers and multiple generators and backups. But, they had a power failure. Then they had some other stuff that, was interesting. The last outage was related to Lambda functions. Now, they didn't tell you whether they were hacked, which killed the Lambda functions. They didn't tell you whether they had a networking problem, which related, then like somebody misconfigured BGP. They just said they had a problem with Lambda. So I want you to think about this from an architecture perspective or a doctor perspective. If you don't know how something's failing and you don't know the weaknesses of the environment, would you tell me how you architect around it? How does a doctor do surgery without not knowing what's in that patient ahead of time?
Say that again, Mike.
Shots fired.
You don't know how to what goes on when things break, because what you hear is just a lambda function problem. How do you build an architect around the weaknesses of someone when they don't tell you what they are?
Yep.
You can't.
All right.
So you've got to go multi-cloud.
Yeah, this is not a multi-cloud discussion, Mike. We'll have a
I know,
multi-cloud discussion another week.
Well, but here's the problem. Once you start using functions, you start getting locked into a single vendor, and that makes multi-cloud become near impossible, much more challenging. Multi-cloud is nothing to do until you start using these proprietary things, and then multi-cloud becomes a nightmare. So if it doesn't matter, serverless is great too.
So Angelo's got a good thread. I don't know if there's a third one coming. Angelo, if you when you get to the end, if you'll just simply put end, I want to make sure we get to the end. But I don't want to put any of them up until we get to the end. So if when you get to the end, just put a message that says end, because I want to get to Angelo's. By the way, Angelo is here. Angelo is an amazing enterprise architect. Love Angelo. He's also a special guest in some of our lessons periodically. So everyone's familiar with Angelo. We love Angelo.
Angelo's wonderful.
So Douglas made a good observation here, I believe. You have to ask how interoperable your written functions are. Can they be deployed using different public cloud providers? However, there are memory considerations. Each public cloud is distinct.
Yes.
Yeah. All just going into that whole holistic big picture discussion that you're bringing up. All right, so we got a number 3. All right, so I'll keep a lookout for that end. All right, so let me see. There was a question I wanted to get to before we continue moving on, because you guys have questions. Me and Alonzo have questions too. So we're going to take Purnell's question here. Can you explain what is meant by cloud native and what makes an application ideal for the cloud, but not ideal for on-prem?
Purnell, it's a completely made-up term that's absolutely meaningless. A cloud native application is something that could either run in a serverless environment or in a containerized environment. So I want you to think about this. If we take a monolith application, let's say we're doing monolith versus serverless, or monolith versus microservices more appropriately, and we take a monolithic application, for example, and we use a container runtime or a container orchestration platform like Kubernetes, we still have to put the container somewhere. So cloud native, a Kubernetes application would be considered cloud native because it's a microservices thing. You could stick it in an AWS Fargate, for example, where your containers run with maybe like an ECS, another proprietary thing to basically control your container orchestration. And you don't have to think about it. The containers auto scale up and down, just like we're talking about. That's cloud native. Now, could you do that in a VMware environment in your data center? Sure. You could have your same Kubernetes environment in your data center. It's standard VMware and standard Linux. Like, what do you call it? Red Hat OpenShift does the same thing in your data center, but now it's cloud native. How about if you run an OpenStack cloud, Purnell, in your data center? You can run that same thing in your data center. So cloud native really means is that you've spent the time and the money to turn it into something that doesn't necessarily have to run on traditional data center hardware, which means virtual machines and traditional environments. That's cloud native. What makes an application ideal for the cloud? Nothing. What makes an application ideal for the data center? Nothing. It's what makes an application ideal is whatever improves the customer's business performance the most. There is no great tech. There is the tech that's best for the business. If it's an ice machine that keeps nurses from running back and forth and walking all day and running overtime, an ice machine provides transformation for that business. And I've worked with a hospital where adding an ice machine saved about 2 hours per nurse per day. So you got to think about what really matters is what's transformational. If I've got a new website for a business that enables customers to order something and it drives revenue, that's transformational. Now, if I've got an application where I want to create a really cool self-healing environment, wow, Kubernetes, which is considered cloud native, looks really great with those microservices. And microservices running on a Fargate, for example, in AWS is now serverless, even though that's not the concept of serverless. So that's cloud native. But what if the application's better as a monolith? So it's the use case of the business, how often it's run, the type of technology it needs, the type of performance it needs. If I'm going to try and reinvent Google from scratch, chances are I'm going to design that to be a Kubernetes microservices-based cloud-native application. Now, I'm still going to probably not stick it in the cloud. I'm going to build my own data center if I'm a Google sale. And believe me, they have thousands of they have data centers with millions of servers populated in it. And they're running lots of things on microservices. They're also running stuff on monoliths, I'm sure. But Google had to build Kubernetes because they needed something that could scale like that for Google scale. And when one pod, for example, crashes, the Kubernetes system knows, oh, wait, I need 50,000 of these running instances. These 10 crashed. Now make 10 more. So, Kubernetes is great. And I love that as cloud native, but, it's just another made up term. Runs the same way in the data center as well.
So Angelo has gotten to the end, but he said he could also keep going. Laugh out loud. I agree with him. Angelo has great observations, great comments, and I think I'm going to go into his thread. But he brings up a very good point that in this thread, and I'm going to say one thing after I read the thread, and then let you guys share whatever you have to share. So Angelo is a working enterprise architect, so he's got great insights here. In my opinion, the question of using serverless comes down to business value and risk. If your business has accepted the risk of a single cloud and their business requirements can be met by serverless, then use it. However, focus on the requirements and choose the technology that meets the need. Sometimes serverless won't meet the need. In those cases, use something else. The value that serverless brings is faster time to market. However, there are other business drivers such as data security, reliability, cross-cloud portability, others to consider as an architect and trusted advisor to the business. Be a trusted advisor by meeting business needs.
Well said.
I can keep going, laugh out loud.
Yeah, and that's again, like
Angelo is a working enterprise architect. At the end of the day, it boils down to the business, what the business needs and requirements are. If the business is perfectly fine with 99% availability and being down for weeks out of the year and don't have any concerns about the cost of serverless, then fine, serverless works for them.
They've got the budget and they've got the bandwidth, then go for it. But if you
if that's what they want, then
and even if serverless gives them 5 hours of downtime per year. And that's probably what we're talking about under normal circumstances.
Oh, yeah, I know. I was just being a bit...
Yeah, but no, Chris made a point, and it could be as bad as that. But let's say it's 5 hours a year. There are businesses that 1 minute of downtime costs $20, $30 million. How about a hospital?
Yeah.
Imagine you re-architect and spend all this money to go to serverless. Now the cloud goes down and people are dying in the hospital because the doctors can't get to their patients.
Or, if conversely, if we talk about finances, it would be equivalent to losing millions of dollars of stock options, those type of opportunities or losses. So when you think about the incremental analysis of if that's right for you, serverless or not, doing the right financial calculations, if you will, to make sure what the success rate and everything else is really you're going to really start getting into those that minutia to find out if this is short or long term worth the company's interests.
Yeah, right. But at the same time, there's companies where 5 hours doesn't matter.
Right. If they can afford it and that's what they want to do, then great. But you think about, Chris, it's like, okay, if they have the money to burn per se, but they don't have the resources on staff to maintain this is why it's serverless. I wonder what those type of dynamics are, because some people, some organizations may have the capital to hire these people, but they don't.
Yep. But because they want to invest in other things. Like the first thing that comes to my mind is a hotel company. Like, and that's just because I work in hotels. But what about a car? What about a car company? I mean, I don't know at all anything about how it works. But let's say we're talking about the reservation system for the maintenance at the car dealership. 5 hours of downtime a year? Yeah, it's like, okay, 5 hours of downtime. The likelihood that they're going to even get their car back when I told them is 0. So, like, 5 hours of downtime, it's like whatever. But making a reservation for purchasing a car, 5 hours of downtime. Maybe that's a different story. Maybe not. But like reservations for the maintenance shop. That's negligible. Will 5 hours of downtime impact them as much as it would a hospital? Probably not. So there's right back to what Angela's talking about. Maybe they're perfectly fine with it because for their business needs, it's not any benefit to them to be able to save that downtime. But anyway, I liked what Angelo had to share just because there were so many things in those 4 to maybe 600 characters total that it basically just boils down to what the business needs and requirements are.
It's all business, but maybe the business needs more agility. And maybe the business is in a transformational state where they're going from X to Y. They bought a new company, they're rebranding, they're changing their main business model, for example. And if that's the case, serverless, which may enable a much faster development and deployment, that time to market, be the first to market with a new product.
Yep.
Let's say the tech costs are to host it yourself are 30 million and to run serverless is 50 million. But if you get that product out 3 months early, you can make another 300 million.
Yep.
Spend the money and don't worry about it. So it's all business case. There is no such thing as a favorite technology. And every time I see somebody on the internet say, "What's your favorite tech?" I can't afford tech. My life has been a consultant. That's what architects are. You're a trusted advisor. The second you've got a favorite tech or a hated tech, you're not an advisor anymore. You're a sales rep who's paid a commission to only sell something. But here's a good thing about a sales rep. Good sales reps only sell what's in their customer's best interest. Because if they sell something that's not in their customer's best interest, they don't get another sale.
My favorite tech is whatever solves my customer's problem.
Yeah, what makes them happy, what keeps them coming back with the building, with the relationships that you built that AI or anything else can compensate for.
Here's my favorite tech. Pick it up and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Pick it up and solve a problem. Use that phone. That's my favorite tech. Right. And I also can have a picture of my cat on my phone at all times. So that's
you mean like I do?
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm the odd man out. I don't have pictures of cats. I got pictures of my family and children.
Well, I mean, hey, look at us. We don't have that. So.
Alonzo, after being married for over 25 years and with my wife now for 28, let me tell you, I try to take a picture of her. No, I don't have my makeup. I don't have my hair. I don't have this. Yes. Cindy, she doesn't say no.
Oh, I take candid shots, so that's a matter of conversation.
So what do you have to do to apologize after taking the candid shots is the bigger question. What is that?
Let's move on. This is a dangerous topic. Right. Let's get back to the topic of discussion. So, and I think this next question is going to come from what we were just talking about. And I'm going to go ahead and start it off with, it depends. Do you think the trade-off for serverless, pros and cons, is worth it?
Depends.
It depends on the business case.
Depends.
I would say in 2/3 of the cases, it's probably better not to go serverless if you run the full analysis. And in 1/3 of the time, it is. But it's like anything else. You got to run an analysis. What the biggest problem is, and I see this with tech, but I also saw it with a physician one time. I went into a physician's office one day and said, I've got this back pain, but I can't tell if it's coming from my back or my hip. And he says, it's coming from your back And he says, here's 80 milligrams of Depomedrol. And then I said, okay, but I want an MRI to find out anyway. And he's like, it's going to get better no matter what, the inflammation. I said, I want an MRI. Sure enough, it came from the hip and not the back. He had made his decision before he even walked in the room. But, you know, I meet people in tech that already have a preferred technology. We're going to do this. In fact, I even had a LinkedIn dialogue exchange with someone that said, what's your preferred approach? And I said, I don't have a preferred approach. And he's like, surely you've got a plan ahead of time based on most people. And I said, I don't have a plan. I'm a trusted advisor, and I can only do what's in the best interest of my customer. And I can't ever know that without a thorough analysis based upon their business goals, their business challenges, their future vision, their current pain points, their financial situation, their weighted average cost of capital, and all the other metrics that we need to look at to make an analysis.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, off topic, even, you know, talking to my firefighter friends, there's no one sure way to fight a fire. So case in point, even in a house fire, if you put grease, water on burning grease, that's not going to go well, versus you adding a different compound or something to suffocate or arrest that flame. It's the same thing. It's all of the stuff is practical, and being able to use experience, but still go through the normal processes of understanding what that organization has done, what they're going through, what their markets are, and all the criteria you listed, Mike. You still need to go through that burden of proof to understand that business, so that you can apply that right amount of remediation to get that done.
Chris is muted again.
We got a question here, and if it's how I think it is, they're brilliant, and I'm gonna give them a little hard time here at the beginning. I'm gonna razz them a little bit. Lakeith says most companies currently operate out of cloud purely. So before we go any further, I'm going to ask you to share your source with me for that.
Yeah, please share your source.
Please share your source. Like seriously, if you're the Lakeith that's in the program, please share your source, because I want to make sure we're up to date. But because my source is that that 89% of companies use multi-cloud approach. 80% take a hybrid cloud approach using public and private clouds, meaning on-prem and private clouds. So 80%, meaning the majority of companies, are not operating on cloud, purely cloud. So like I said, I'm going to razz you a little bit here, Lakeith. So if you got that source, send me that source. But if not, I'll send my source to you. But the follow-up to that, what does a cloud architect need to learn in order to stay relevant and employable in a market where such firms have adopted serverless?
Okay, so
I want to rephrase it. What does a cloud architect need to learn in order to stay relevant and employable in a market where firms will be utilizing cloud more? I think that may be a more appropriate, because cloud's here and it's gonna be integrated more.
Yeah, and where we stand, most data is about 89% are multi-cloud, with 98% planning to be multi-cloud within the next 2 years. And about 80% of or more enterprises still have their data center, and most of it is not serverless. 90% of it is not. So here's the thing: if your fundamentals are good, containers, databases, security appliances, firewalls, IAM systems, VPN concentrators, IDS, IPS systems, guess what? It's the same tech on your data center, your Nutanix cloud, your OpenStack cloud, your AWS cloud, your Azure cloud, because you're not going to be using the cloud native firewalls anyway, because they're not going to be good enough. And you're going to be using the same things. Now, guess what? The ability to perform an ROI model, you need to learn. The ability to manage a team, because guess what? Nothing ever great was designed by a single person. The ability to manage stakeholders, the ability to manage vendors, the ability to sell your product, because as a cloud architect, you may have a $150,000 base salary, but you might have a $250,000 bonus or a $300,000 bonus based upon how much you can sell. So think about how much you want to earn and how much you want to get rewarded, And here's the thing. The cloud architect that does billion-dollar architectures gets promoted a lot more than the person that goes in and can't sell. The cloud architect that can make their customers successful. And you know what, here, and for example, so like if I worked with a lot of customers and we got reference press releases and reference white papers out of it. Those are the kind of things. Now, how do you get that? You got to have the right business acumen, you got to have the right leadership, you got to sell the vision to your customer, you got to help them adopt it and manage the relationships. It's all about relationships. So there's that.
Mike, could you do me a favor and share, because a lot of them, I think they make an assumption that they make those decisions right off the cuff. What is the usual time frame for an organization to make a decision after you've pitched that architecture to them?
I've negotiated a deal after everything was done, RFP was responded, for 3 months of just negotiations back and forth in the room with the lawyers, the account executive, the legal team of both parties. So, you know, I've worked on architectures that take a year to design and 50 people to design. I've worked on architectures where I've traveled 100,000 miles just meeting experts in various fields. So, you know, it's a lot of it. Now, you know, the funny thing is, I've worked on architectures where I spent $200,000 on lunches and dinners and drinks just to get to know the client and to keep the engineers that were happy that we're doing proof of concept. So it really depends. But, you know, when we go to the technology, you have to think about anything that will make your customer more successful. Anything. Is it AI? Yeah, it's part of it now. Is it, you know, what an organization can do with data? Not that you need to be a data architect and you're sure not making ETL tools and mapping and reducing things in Python scripts, but, you know, you need to think about how data is going to make. You need to think about networking and all the networking components, whether it be BGP or your WAN technologies, for example, all the tech that makes it work. And here's the good thing, Lycus, there's nothing new. There was an RFC 25. It was written by the Society of Old Farts. Go look it up. I didn't make it up. And, you know, there were a couple of things and they said, nothing changes. It just gets renamed. You know, in 1999, it was VMware. It was a virtual machine. Now it's an EC2 instance or a compute engine instance or a virtual machine based upon, but it's the same thing. Nothing's changed. In 1996, the Frame Relay Cloud created virtual links across the system. In 1998, the ATM Cloud did it. In 2000, the VPLS Cloud did it with Martini tunnels over an MPLS network. Now you want a private link from AWS, they create a private link for you.
I got a good question. So it is who I thought it's who I thought it was, obviously. So the thing that prompted his question is Capital One. And if you're familiar with this, then Capital One famously went 100% cloud. I really, we've been talking on Slack over here. He's one of our. He's
a great guy.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy. So he has a good question. He said, if he were to get an architect role at a company that is already 100% cloud, what would that role for the architect look like there? That's already there.
Okay, so Laketh, that's a great question.
That is a great question.
And I've been most of my architect work is in pre-sales, but I also work post-sales. So
that's a good question. I'm glad I picked on him a little bit.
I'm going to get it, but I'm going to ask Chris a question real fast.
Sure.
How often do I come up with a new idea that we need to innovate on?
Oh God. So much, and so Mike comes up with so many ideas that I told him he had to get an old-fashioned recorder so that he could just press record and record the idea and send it to me. Because I'm like, I can't, Mike. I need you to store these somewhere and give them to me all at once. Like, I need you to make a repository. I need you to run a Lambda function for yourself and give me.
So the reason I asked Chris that question, and Chris is the throttling saying, yes, Mike, I know we want to do this, but we can achieve this now, we can achieve this a year from now or 3 years from now. Business is never static. So first, let's say the company goes serverless and it's smooth. Great. Or they go serverless and realize that their tech bill got so expensive they want to get off of it. Now your new migration plan is re-architect those applications and make them non-serverless. A law changed. Okay, so a new regulatory environment. The US decides to raise corporate taxes. You know what you're doing? You're offshoring your business and you're creating a new LLC with that company so they can avoid paying US higher corporate taxes rates. And now you got to go help them make that run. I'm not joking.
I know you're not. That's why I'm laughing so hard.
And it happens every single day. Now AI comes out there and whoa, it can really help.
Welcome to how businesses do business.
Help business do business. So for the next 3 years, the cloud architect is going to be running on AI project after AI project after AI project. And as soon as that's done, guess what? There's robots. Robots are coming out. Now you're going to be building the infrastructure for the robots. You know, for example, there's a robot delivering food and
building or designing.
Designing. We don't touch the tech. We just like it. We do use Word documents and PowerPoint presentations and Excel spreadsheets, all the pencil pushing things that you would see any other executive do.
I'm in a picking on people mood at this point.
Yeah.
So.
And that's actually good. I didn't exactly get any rest. I was in Palm Beach for a massage, and I ran right back home to be here.
So the key here is that just because they're already there, that's just like I bought a house. I'm not done with the house. I bought a house. Things are going to be changing.
Let's take it from a house to a hotel.
Sure. I just bought
Let's say you build a brand new hotel.
Yep.
Now there's a new technology that can make it poof. You're changing that hotel. Now there's a new kind of flat screen TV. You got to swap out all the TVs. Yeah. Now we need better wireless. So there's new innovations.
Yeah, always. Yeah. So good. And that's
a great question.
That's a good point. I'm glad we had that discussion, Lakeith. So just because it's already there doesn't mean that there's not work to be done. You're always the business is always going to be innovating, which is going to result in innovations that need to be implemented or solutions designed to support those innovations. So you're going to be doing. I'm going to recommend that you actually reach out to some of your fellow colleagues that are now alumni that are working at JP Morgan Chase on Slack. They could probably give you some good feedback about what you would be doing as someone that's already has solutions. Even though it's not 100% cloud, it's still a very similar situation. JP Morgan's already got their data center. They already have their own cloud that they built. It's not going to stay the same forever. It's not going to stay the same for a month.
Exactly. And actually, while we're at it, Capital One went all cloud. JP Morgan Chase built their own cloud, and they claim they've saved $2.2 billion a year by not using a public cloud as their primary cloud. And for someone of their scale, I bet they can easily save $2 billion a year by not using the public cloud because it's going to be much cheaper at their scale to build it themselves.
Yep. So you've got it there. Exactly. Whatever the case, remain the trusted advisor. Yep. You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. Give you a hard time. All right. Alonzo, I've got plenty of questions over here in the chat box, but do you have any questions that we might not have covered?
I'm not sure, but you've got all these cloud service providers. They're always pushing serverless. The question is why?
That's a great question. So what if I could put you in something that made it near impossible for you to leave without spending a fortune?
There you go. Could you put my quote back up, Chris?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. find
it. There was a time where people in networking would recommend a proprietary routing protocol. Now, even when I worked for that same company, I never used it. And why did I never use it? Because I wanted my customers to be able to use the best product at any time. With EIGRP, for example, you could only use Cisco devices. And I love Cisco. It's probably the best networking company in the world and probably the best tech company in the world. They're in the top 10. But what if the company needed to use an Extreme switch or a Juniper switch or whatever? And if they used intermediate systems to intermediate systems or OSPF, they could. If they used EIGRP, they either were stuck using only Cisco, which wouldn't be a bad thing, or they had to use Cisco and everybody else and create route redistributions, which is a real nightmare. So, kind of keep that. So I try to use open standards whenever possible, and vendors love to use closed standards, kind of like my Mac. I've got all this stuff that I spent a fortune for in my Mac. Now, if I wanted to switch over to Windows, which I've tried doing in the past, guess what? Half of my applications don't work anymore. Now I got to buy new ones. So, I'm invested. I've got, multiple professional Macs in the house, and I'm invested in the Mac ecosystem. If I want to go to the Windows ecosystem, I got to go start all over, and a lot of my apps I have to rebuy. And some of them are pretty expensive that we've invested in.
So cloud providers are all excited about serverless because that's their product. That's their product. It's just like Ford being all excited about the F-150 and not the Chevy Silverado.
And I mean, it's an easy shift into thinking the more invested you are in their certifications, what's going to be the odds of you going in another direction?
Yeah.
And also think about it from another way, from a statistics perspective. If you've got 256 physical cores in a machine, you've got 512 virtual cores. So let's say we needed 8 cores in a server. We can make 64 servers without oversubscribing in that server. But now let's look at the real statistical analysis. Let's say we made 64 servers on that server. What are the chances that each one of those servers is at 100% CPU all the time? Slim to none. So now, even though we have 64 servers, we might actually have the capacity to make 200 versus 64. Now, when you purchase a virtual machine, you're guaranteed a level of performance. But on serverless, they can split the load across many, many more services. And they can just add capacity or lower it, which means serverless is going to be a much more profitable business model because they can use a much higher level of oversubscription, and they can add a tremendous number of servers very simply and elegantly. So it goes back to the Hotel California. You can check in anytime you want, but you can never leave. You can leave, but it's going to be hard to leave. It's kind of like leaving the mob. We're going back to the Godfather example or whatever example Alonzo used. I've watched a lot of mobster movies. I lived in New Jersey and saw The Sopranos. People don't leave the Sopranos family, at least in that show. So you can check in, you can check out. So let's go back to the John Gotti quote or whatever quote Alonzo found. I don't watch a lot of TV or movies to know where it came from.
I'm just laughing at how we got from shrimp and grits to John Gotti.
we diverse.
Welcome back to Head in the Clouds, everybody. Where you never know what we're gonna say. Oh
man.
Okay. I love it. I love it. This is why I love this. Oh man. This is great. This is why we do this. This is when I say this is where we come to unwind and still talk about the things that matter. It's where we come to unwind. Let's see here. What do we have in the chat box?
And there's some fun non-server and serverless questions in there too.
Say that again.
There's also some fun serverless and non-serverless questions.
Oh yeah. So, but I got one I want to bring up real fast. Because Steve kind of stole my thought, but I was like, I don't know if
he pulled out Sony Beta. Okay, Steve. Okay.
Well, I'm way back. I'm about 30 minutes ago. I'm not sure which one you're looking at. So Steve said serverless equals fast, functions as a server.
Exactly.
And I was thinking earlier, I was like, so serverless is just basically servers as a service, but they can't call it that because there's SaaS, which is software as a service. And it would get really confusing. But essentially, that's what it is. It's managed servers. You take care of my servers.
It's a managed thing. So instead of infrastructure as a service or platform or software as a service, look, these are all made up names too.
Right.
I personally hate these ridiculous names. What is it? We're renting a data center. Okay. Now I know what it is.
Right. So, because they say this leads to Aisha's question, which is a great question. As serverless still uses servers, so serverless also requires powerful servers or not? Yes. Like containers also use an operating system, but too tiny, and we say containers do not contain OS images. I don't understand all that stuff. That's above my.
So here's the thing: containers also pull the libraries from the operating system in general. And that's why you don't have to create their own virtual machine. Serverless is going to run on the biggest, fastest servers that the cloud providers can buy. And they're going to have as many of them as possible running. And they're just going to run your function, and they're going to spread the load wherever they can.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about cloud computing and essentially serverless by an extension. We talk about the hotel a lot, but the more appropriate comparison is the apartment complex.
That's all it is.
Or I don't have the finances to build a house or buy a house, but you do, and you can build a lot of them at a cheaper cost and then turn around and rent them to me at a very profitable price for you. It's the same concept. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, all these players, they've got the money to buy these massive quantity of massive servers. So it's not like they're just going out and buying 10 high-powered servers.
No, millions.
Millions. They're going out and buying millions of them.
And, so let's get back to this, because it's a very good thing that you brought up, Aisha. So it's really called the hoteling business. A hospital is a hoteling business. You get them in, you get them out.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have enough people staying in a hotel, you send some employees home. If you don't have enough people staying in the hospital, you send your nurses home.
Yep.
And really, it's a landlord-tenant business. It will almost exclusively cost less for the landlord to buy a property than they can afford to rent it out for. Always. It has to, because otherwise the landlords would go bankrupt.
Yep.
If it costs them $2,000 a month to finance something, they have to rent it out for $3,000 because they've got to cover all the other expenses. So same thing in the cloud. Now, Aisha, what the cloud providers have tried to tell people, and partially it's true and partially it's not true, and they say economies of scale. And let's talk about what that means. Economies of scale means as you buy more, it's typically cheaper to buy it than it would be if I buy it. I buy a server from Dell, it's going to be $300,000. AWS buys the same server, it's going to be $250,000. So they can do that. Now, they would say that makes it cheaper, but I want to talk about hyperscale. A company that's led by me, Chris, and Alonzo is fast. Chris, I dreamed up this idea. Can we do it? Yeah. Alonzo, you and me and 3 other people, let's work on it and let's get it done in the next month. We can do that. Now we're at a 20,000 person company. We've got an economy of scale. We can buy things cheaper, but we can't move as fast. Now let's look at the US government, say the military. Can they do anything fast? They want to upgrade all their technology. They're now at such scale that they need such extreme governance of everything they do that it ends up costing 3 to 5 times more than a business could do it. Because when you reach hyperscale, you take so much management and so many layers to make it work that it ends up not being cheaper. There's no economy of scale because you're now at hyperscale. Nutanix uses a great term for these cloud providers. They call them hyperscalers. And that's really what they are. They are so big that it takes so much to manage them that all the benefits of the economies of scale are actually lost now they're in hyperscale. So the key is, if I'm going to stay in an apartment for a year, it's a lot cheaper to move into that apartment for a year than it is to buy a house, pay the closing costs on the way in, pay at a realtor's commission on the way out, just to save money over the landlord's profit. But Aisha, over 5 or 6 years, it might be cheaper to buy the house than it would be to rent it. And a rent versus buy decision, you're always looking at a lot of factors. The cloud is just a rent versus buy decision. Is it cheaper to buy? Is it cheaper to build? But Aisha, where people don't get it is a lot of people think that if I'm going to buy my servers from Dell and I have to buy $50 million of servers from Dell, I'm going to write a check for $50 million to Dell. This is the myth. And then they think, well, our payment over here on the cloud is this, but we don't have to come up with $50 million. Here's the reality. Everybody finances their technology anyway. And that's why you have to look at the organization's weighted average cost of capital, which is why capital costs them. And now you're looking at the finance charges, the mortgage. Is the mortgage cheaper than than the rent at the cloud. And how long are you going to use it? When are you going to use it? What are your scaling needs? Do you need to scale out frequently? Is it applications that move up and down constantly? Cloud's cheaper. Is it continuous use applications? Data center is cheaper. So it requires a complete analysis to be able to predict something.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what you said there at the end, it is a myth that things are paid for outright. Now, granted, they may write a check for $50 million, but guess where that $50 million came from?
Right.
Somewhere that they're paying a small fee for borrowing those funds. Just I'm going to go back to my hotel because that's my experience. Building a brand new hotel, I might have enough capital. I might have enough cash to pay for it outright, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go to the bank. I'm going to go get a construction loan, and I'm going to use the construction loan and pay a small interest rate. Well, now a little bit higher interest rate, but I'm not going to pay the same interest rate that a consumer would for their mortgage or for their personal loans. I'm going to pay a much smaller rate because I'm a company, and I've got a great sheet. So yeah, I might write a $5 million check to the general contractor, but that's because I got $10 million from the bank that is being financed. so yeah, it might look like JP Morgan Chase probably just spent $100 million on their data center and paid for it outright. Well, yeah, but I'm pretty sure they're paying somebody a little bit of money for that $100 million that they borrowed.
And let's look at what their weighted average cost of capital is. People give them their money every day and they pay them 2% interest on it or 3% interest.
Right. I was about to say maybe JP Morgan isn't the best example, but Bayfront Healthcare here in Tampa. They built a new hospital. Yeah, they may pay $50 million for it or $100 million for it. But they've got that money that is being financed by the bank. Yeah. So yeah, they've got a $50 million in cash, but they're going to go to the bank and borrow it. And it's welcome again to how businesses do business.
Yeah, they're not going to blow all their liquid on.
Yeah, I'm going to keep my cash.
Yeah.
And go borrow based on the assets that I have. The 20 other hotels that I already have are going to help me to borrow the money to build this new hotel. So, let's see. Which one? I think you saw one that you wanted to do, Mike.
The trusted advisor one versus a technical account manager. That one's pretty important.
That is a good one. And
that's
so I'm gonna, for everybody. I am going out of order here to get to this one. Barara. What is the difference between trusted advisor and technical account manager? Can both roles be assumed in a single cloud provider versus multi-cloud provider?
Well, here Barara, I want to give you what a technical account manager is. They have a job and it's to sell you stuff for the single cloud. If they sell you more stuff, they get to buy a boat with their commissions. If they don't sell you anything, they're fired and they're looking for their next job. Imagine a doctor that only got paid if he wrote Pfizer prescriptions. That's what a technical account manager is. So they're what you would call completely untrusted advisor because they are paid to sell you something. A trusted advisor is someone that is basically as close to neutral as possible. Now, there's really no such thing as a trusted advisor because everybody has to sell something. But the reality is, I worked as a trusted advisor. I was part of a special part of Cisco, and it was called the Internet Business Solutions Group. Everybody was an executive in this team. We were very close to the CEO, and we were hired for this reason. I would go to hospitals and talk about their healthcare technology. And I didn't get paid a commission. I didn't get sales bonuses. It was my job to advise a customer on whether a technology was going to improve their business or hurt their business. Now, Barrera, in that job, first day on the job, sales rep had something they wanted to sell. The chief nursing officer said to me, Mike, what do you think of this? And I said, I don't think it's right for you. That's a trusted advisor. Now they asked me, what do you think is right for me? And I drew up a plan that I thought was right for them. And they were like, Mike, thank you. We're so happy with this. But I'm not a hammer in search of a nail. The technical account manager is like a dog with a bone. I got to sell you this. I got to sell you this. I got to sell you this. Now, truth be told, Barara, if they're an excellent sales rep, I mean, the top of the bunch, and then they won't be a technical account manager. They'll be a global account manager, or which is a much bigger position than a technical account manager. When you're at that level, where you're at the elite level of sales, where you're dealing with a $300,000 to $600,000 a year salary, now you become a motivated, semi-trusted advisor. And here's what I mean by that. If you've got a customer that you can do $100 million of sales with every single year, you must at that point become more of a trusted advisor. Because if you advise that customer on something to get a commission or a spiff or to win a sales contest, you may get that $10 million sale and you may get a $200,000 commission check, but you may never sell anything to that customer again. So what you see when it comes to sales professionals is that the less strategic jobs, they have relatively low base pay and extremely high commissions. And when you get to the elite sales jobs, they have a very high base pay and a moderate amount of commissions. And that's kind of what you can see. The more a person is paid to sell, the less trusted they'll actually be. As a cloud architect, you have to be trusted, which means you can't be the super excited sales rep, because they're hiring you to make sure that the technical account manager doesn't oversell things that don't work. And that's why all these companies have it. You know, at Cisco, you got a sales engineer and an account manager, and then they bring in the architects to kind of function in between the business people and the tech people. AWS has a technical account manager, which is go sell, 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 and they pair them with a solution architect that is hopefully not going to let that technical account manager sell something that's that's not in the best interest of the customer, because once they do that, and the customer tells another customer, it made up. And it could be the same thing with a Microsoft or a Google, anywhere in between. They want to know that you're there. So the architects must be trusted. The account managers are generally not trusted based upon the way they're paid.
That was a good question there.
It was a great one.
So let's see.
Where's my cat staring at me saying I want to go outside?
Pretty quick question here, or a pretty quick answer. We've been talking about this throughout the show. Kevin says, for a small business, would a multi-cloud be feasible, or would a hybrid bare metal private cloud be better? Obviously, it would depend on budget and ability to increase revenue. It depends.
Kevin, I want you to think about
this. We don't have enough information in that amount of characters.
Yeah. We don't have enough. Now, for a small business, the bigger question, Kevin, is should we go cloud or host it in our data center?
Oh, for a small business, if I'm talking about a small business,
Cloud.
I'm saying, is there a SaaS out there to solve whatever I need?
Yeah.
Like, is there a software as a service that will solve my need? If I'm a small business, if I'm a restaurant, am I going to be okay with OpenTable?
Yeah.
Maybe I just need OpenTable to take my reservations, and then use whatever platforms my vendors use to place ordering.
Exactly. But exactly as Chris described. But small business might be cheaper to host it in their building without a data center. It also might be cheaper on a cloud. Or guess what? By the time you use 2 availability zones, if the small business needs that level of availability, put 1 availability zone in Azure and 1 in AWS. Now you've got high availability, and it's the same cost because it's basically the same amount of stuff in 2 places. Yeah. And let DNS route between them, assuming it's a public.
Yeah, so, I mean, the biggest thing is, what type of business is it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really good. Like, you got to have a whole lot of information, and you have to fit. And TOGAF, they started off. I think they've got the preliminary phase, which is like the very beginning thing, and it's like, if you're just using TOGAF as an example here, you got to get information about what the needs are. And that's what we talk about all the time, is you've got to get the information of the customer and what their needs are and what their requirements are. So it really just depends.
Yeah.
Angelo, back with some knowledge here. Serverless, VM, containers, bare metal, etc. are tools in your toolkit. As an architect, know the value of each and when to use them. Choose the best tool for the job. Don't be a hammer looking for a nail. Taking this point to a higher level, sometimes building a solution isn't the right fit. Sometimes buying a business application is better to meet the business needs. In your toolkit, know your tools and their value. They each have value. Your job is to bring value to the business. When appropriate, use technology. Know that technology is only one option.
Yep.
I want to take that to an even higher level because you mentioned buying an application. Before there was face recognition to log into your phones, and Apple used the fingerprint technology. They didn't create that. They went out there and bought that. They said, this is already here. They know what they're doing. They did it. Boom, buying you. Not going to spend my resources, time, effort, and energy on trying to create something that somebody else has already done. I'm going to go buy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really high level example of know the value. Like Apple doesn't do fingerprint technology, so they're not going to
buy it somewhere else. Yeah.
They're going to go buy it. And instead of buying the service, they just bought the whole company. So just one example. But yeah, right on, Angelo, right on.
And he's completely right. I think we have to highlight there's a difference between cost and value. We talk about serverless costs and serverless expenses. Look, I got a little friend who came to visit. She's in the background, as you could see.
Yep.
And, if you buy something for $1 and it does nothing for you, it's an expense. If you add a new technology and it costs $1 billion, but it helps generate $3 billion in profit, it's worth it. So we always have to build an ROI or return on investment model for everything that we actually build to figure out what's right or what's wrong. And that little cat, I got her from my wife, totally unrelated. My wife loves cats. And the next thing I realized that cat's like the second love of my life. That cat Cindy is a very good, sweet little girl.
She doesn't come on here. She must want to play.
Yeah.
She wants to play. She has a little bit of a bruise on her cheek from something that happened, I guess, that I don't know about outside.
I'm pretty sure she instigated the fight.
Yeah, she does attack everything,
Yeah.
especially a Maine Coon that weighs 20 plus pounds. So,
and I guarantee you that Maine Coon's just sitting over there like, oh, I want to be your friend. I want to play.
That's all it was. The Maine Coon came every day to be her friend, and Cindy's like, no.
So
I think that's an attack of a lizard. I think maybe she grabbed an auntie or an uncle a few weeks back, and it's going for revenge.
Yeah. So Digital Divi asks, Mike, what's your take on network implications for serverless when it comes to security and compliance?
Well, Digital Divi, let's go off of serverless and onto cloud, comparing cloud security versus data center security. And while I'm at it, let me just open up a closet door because my cat's trying to open the door, and her way of doing it is tunneling under the carpet. So it's okay. You can go in there now, Cindy. So look, let's say you're in the data center. If I want to make sure that Chris's data is prioritized over Alonzo's data, I can. In the data center, I can say voice goes first, video goes second, mission critical application goes third, and everything else goes fourth. And then Chris's PC gets a worm and starts spewing the worm. And guess what? All the critical traffic will get through instead of his worm. Now, Digital Divi, in the data center, I can run what's called the private VLAN, which means I can have two servers in the same subnet that can't talk to each other, even before I apply an access list or anything else to the server. In the server, I can make it that if Alonzo plugs in his Mac versus the PC that I gave him, the port shuts down and sends me an email that says, security alert, security alert, security alert. In my data center, I can micro-segment that network so tight that who can talk to whom. In my data center, I can hire some Navy SEALs and arm them with machine guns to make sure that if anybody tries to get in the data center, they can't. In the cloud, I can't do any of that. So when it really comes to critical security, you can always build tighter security in your data center than the cloud. Now, Digital Divi, here's the bigger question. Who has the sophistication to build a more secure data center than the cloud provider? I do, because I've been building it forever. And many organizations like JP Chase that are running their private clouds can build a much more secure private cloud than you could ever get in a public cloud. But, and here's the big but, for the average organization that doesn't have mission critical security needs, and for the average organization that doesn't have really deep, excellent, and expert network architects and security architects, the cloud and serverless will be more secure than the average organization would get on their own. So again, it goes back to it depends. If you need super critical stuff, you use something else. Why do you think the government doesn't run on the same cloud as the rest of the AWS people or Azure people? They run a separate cloud because they don't want their stuff mixed because they need greater security. And if you need greater security and you can't tell your cloud provider, I want my own private cloud separate than everybody else's cloud and I want to do this, you're going to get more security building it your own. So the answer is it depends, and you've got to analyze 1,000,001 factors before you can get to the true answer. But it's a great question.
Hadn't seen this name in a while. From Noah Parker. What's really cool is I work for a company that will put a company in any cloud or straight up build a generic or custom server to solve their problem.
Noah Parker is an incredible cloud architect. He used to be one of our students. He's fantastic in every way. And that's a good company, Noah. Someone that analyzes their customers' needs and says, I'm going to find what's best for you. Noah, it was wonderful working with you as a student. I appreciated that you came from a social work background where you were, again, helping people, and now you're helping businesses. Congratulations, Noah. You are fantastic at what you're up to.
Yeah. And if you feel like sharing any more,
please do so.
We'd love for you to pop in every once in a while as well. We had Jermaine and Arun took over one of mine and Alonzo's classes Friday and turned into the Jermaine and Arun show by accident, but that was fun. The students really liked that. So if you're able to pop in every once in a while.
Please.
Richard says, is there a way to download data and save resources previously used from serverless? Also, serverless may only be useful for developers and short-time users, I think. I'm sure there is, and I'm sure it's costly, but let's hear what Mike and Alonzo have to say.
The key is, Richard, our data is not going to be stored in the serverless environment. It's going to be stored in storage somewhere. So pulling the data would be nothing. Now, recoding the application would have to be done. Now, can that code be partially leveraged, fully leveraged, tuned? Yeah, obviously the answer is yes. And the key is serverless is a developer's best friend, because if you're a developer and you don't know about networking and data center concepts, and all of a sudden you want to put something up there, serverless is looking really exciting. It really is. If you're in a networking and a data center person, you can look at it and say, well, this is McDonald's versus Morton's. So, but it all depends on where you're coming from. And sometimes serverless is great all the time. I love serverless to use a Lambda function to remediate a misconfigured S3 bucket. There's applications that sometimes serverless I also think is best, but it's a case by case basis. I'd say from experience, about 2/3 of the time, it's going to be better to not be serverless, and 1/3 of the time it will be. And when it is better, use it. They always use what's in the best interest of your customer.
All right. So Abdallah says, if I have a trading bot API and it makes a request every second to Binance for every bot which create by a user, is Lambda good?
I don't know. Run a business analysis and look at exactly what each thing cost you, and then consider what it would cost you to put that same server functionality on a server. Calculate the CPU, memory, and DRAM resources, and then you'll know. One thing per second, chances are it's probably going to be great on Lambda, because that's not exactly heavy use, but I don't know the computational resources. Yeah. What if you could run it? What if you could run that thing on a free EC2 instance versus paying for Lambda, because the needs are so low? What if you could run it on a virtual machine sitting on your PC, and I'm not the PC you use every day, but one that's sitting in your house? Maybe you've got an old computer, you stick VMware ESXi on it, and it only needs one CPU core, and it could run in your environment cheaper, and then you could put a backup computer in your parents' house. One Lambda function per second is kind of nothing. but I still run a business case on everything.
So if you guys have any more questions, put them there in the chat box for us. We're going to be here for another 14 minutes. Been doing pretty good on that New Year's resolution about trying to end on time. So we're going to keep it up. As much as I'd love to keep going, I got shrimp and grits waiting. So yeah, not going to be 8 o'clock gets here. I'm out. You guys can keep going, but I'm out. Let's see here. Alonzo, did you have any questions? As I see, if
I'm not, going through. We've really hit the conversation across both sides of the tennis match, but I'm not sure if Mike ever mentioned anything. Say, for instance, if we would implement something serverless, what would excite you about applying serverless to our platform?
To ours?
Just in general, if you had maybe not our particular current situation, but if you would, what would excite you about serverless if you were to use it? Like imagine you're in a business that serverless would work for. What would excite you about it?
There's nothing that excites me about serverless.
We're putting Mike
There's nothing that would excite me about serverless. Now, the question is, would I use it and when would I use it? I'm not excited by any technology. I'm excited by making my customer successful.
Right, that's what we're saying. Like, you're the customer. Like,
I would use it. I would use it to have security-based functions, event-driven security architectures, and that excites me.
Okay.
As far as everything else, if I'm going to use a monolith, it's going to sit on a virtual machine, and I have more control. If I have a microservices application, I'm really going to want it to sit in the Kubernetes environment because I don't believe in proprietary anything. I really want open so moving. Maybe it comes from, upbringing and being in high availability environments and things. But let's say I wanted to start a new software development company and I wanted to develop software very fast. And I had a bunch of people that were as idea generators like me that came up with a new idea per minute. And I had a 1,000 overly motivated, energy drink oriented software developers sitting in a room. And I said, here, experiment, create something amazing. Serverless would truly excite me because they'd be able to put something up there real fast, test it out real fast. And I could say, I really love that. Now let's go build it. So in those environments, it would really excite me. Speed and agility. Now, if I was involved in a new AI business, not that would really run on serverless, but the stuff that couldn't run on serverless, I'd probably be interested. And here's the reason why. When I'm dealing with something like that, that's going to change so fast, I'm going to look for as many agility things I can in my environment as I look for. So if I needed agility, it would be really exciting to me. If I was a software company, it would be real exciting to me. From a security perspective, those event-driven security architectures, I think they are the coolest thing. It's one of the reasons I actually love cloud computing. Now, could you run a function in your private cloud? Of course you could. It doesn't have to be a public cloud, but I really do like that. But I do like it does enable a business to function more and focus on its business goals and think less about its technology, which all in all, when serverless came out, 4 and 5 and 6 years ago, I think was great. In today's world, I don't think technology cannot be a core competency. I think a business that's not an expert on tech right now is out of business, unless it's like a law firm. A law firm might be great by using something like this because they need to think about law and billable legal hours, not, their tech stuff. A doctor's office, great. They don't want to think about their technology. Just give me something that's going to work, a SaaS application or something. So for me, it's all about what are we trying to achieve. If I need agility, I like serverless. If I need high availability, I don't like serverless because I want something in multiple clouds.
All right. Yeah. So Noah's got
Most
some
definitely.
things. Oh, Alonzo.
Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Noah put some in here, and they kind of go back to the examples that we were talking about earlier. If depending on your work situation. So MLB, Slack, Netflix, all use serverless. I would too. I can those I can be down for hours and not have to worry about it. Like that
Let-
makes complete sense for some of them.
Let's talk a lot about Netflix.
That's a
Netflix
good
uses a
idea.
lot of non-serverless things too. Sure, they host their video in object storage, but they're using Apache Cassandra, they're using Kafka, they're not using all those serverless functions like SQS. So in some ways, they use serverless. For a static website, yeah. For video hosting, yeah, I'd rather stick on an object storage. That's a great point.
Yeah.
But, you know, at least half of Netflix's stuff is not serverless. And
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean,
notice,
that brings up a good point. I mean, serverless is not it doesn't like, and Angelo brought up a good follow up to that. The word serverless has changed over time.
yeah,
It no longer applies to just compute. It has come to mean managed service, the ability
Yep.
to run cloud services without managing. So yeah, some companies are saying that they're using serverless things, and they may be meaning this newer version of the definition of serverless, not this specific one that we're discussing for the majority of this show
True.
here.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, and we included both because we talked about Fargate versus serverless versus a function. Some people try to divide these, and are confused, but technically it's all serverless now.
yeah,
DynamoDB is serverless. There's nothing to think about. Now, why doesn't Netflix use DynamoDB? Why do they use Apache Cassandra? There's good reasons for it.
Mhm.
Why did Netflix have a problem with elastic block storage? Because it couldn't keep up with their performance and things that they had to do around it. So when it comes to architecture, everything is a trade-off. And, is the juice worth the squeeze? That's what you use for your decision.
So Mufazar has a question for the cloud architect role. Are there any skill differences for public sector versus finance sector?
Yeah. So once you start getting into finance, you're dealing with extremes in performance. And that means if you don't have good, strong, high availability and high performance skills, you can't do the job. So you need to have much more networking performance to get any of these really elite jobs. And finance would be one of the elite jobs. In the public sector, there's no money for the most part. And, when I go to renew my nurse practitioner license, it goes down on a Friday and nobody notices it until Tuesday. That's public sector. So the people in the public sector environment, they're not necessarily working with as much of a degree of profitability or business performance enhancement. They're not looking for the same level of digital transformation in the public sector. They're not looking for competitive advantages because there is no competition. And you don't have to have the level of skill to work in the public sector that you would in the finance sector. But the same networking and data center skills apply, the same business acumen skills apply, but you got to be better to work in the finance sector.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to ask Mike for some last words here. But before I do, Alonzo, do you have any last words?
Yeah, I got last words. This was an awesome podcast. It's good to be back, especially with this type of platform, with this subject matter, and really drilling down to the differences of serverless versus what it is, server versus serverless, and everything that people have brought in, what Mike has laid out and simplified. I love being here and I love learning. I mean, it's even in our positions, there's always time. There's always opportunity to learn between each other, from Mike, from Chris, and back and forth. So let's continue to get it going.
All right. And Mike, I'm going to tee it up for you with Angelo's last comment. It's a question and it answers itself. What is the best technology? The one that meets the business need. So, Mike, wrap up this server versus serverless conversation for us.
Server versus serverless, cloud versus data center, BMW versus Toyota, apartment versus house. You have to figure out what are the goals. Everything comes to analysis. You know, at the engineering level, they're just engineers are building stuff. At the architect level, it's all about business. We must focus on making our customers more successful. And what is that? Well, it's different. It may be having systems which save lives. For a bank, it's about earning more money. Every business is different. And the goals that you have to build the bank versus a hospital are completely different. For public sector, there is no competition. How is that different than a regular business? So what are the business needs? What does that mean? What is the business trying to achieve? Increased revenue? Great. Improved communication and collaboration? Great. Cost savings? Great. Improved employee productivity? Great. A new offering or a new service that they want to sell? Great. Better predictions or inferences, let's say for an airline on how they purchase their fuel contracts? Great. Note, I mentioned a whole lot of different things, and I mentioned it for a reason. To be an architect, you have to be able to understand the business. If all you know is the tech, you're not an architect. And that's why people that just get certified don't get architecture jobs. And here's the thing. You've seen some of my people tonight that got architect jobs with zero background in tech, but they were competent. The reason businesses want experience is because they want to know that you're not certified like a hammer in search of a nail. Hey, I got to go serverless. I got to use this because I was taught this. They want to know that you know what to do, when to do it. They want to know that you know which security vendors to go to when it needs security, because you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You can't just secure your systems in AWS, or you can't just secure your systems in Azure. You're going to need other tools from other people, and that's okay. That's what architecture is. It's looking at the people, the processes, and the technology to improve the business, to improve the customer's experience, to improve profitability, or whatever the business is trying to achieve. So I invite you to think about it this way. Don't think about the tech. Don't love any tech. Love making your customer successful. Love whatever solves their problems. Sometimes serverless is the best thing in the world. Sometimes it's the worst thing in the world. Sometimes a hybrid multi-cloud is the greatest thing ever. Sometimes a hybrid multi-cloud is the worst thing, and sticking it in a single cloud, a single availability zone for a mom and pop shop that's got 2 employees is great. Maybe it is. What are the needs of the business? What I love about architecture is every customer is different. I used to practice internal medicine. You know what? I never had a diagnosis made before I walked in the person's room. Yeah, sure, somebody would come in and say, I have a sore throat. But was it viral? Was it bacterial? If so, was it beta hemolytic strep? Was it chlamydia? Was it any what other bacteria? It could have been anything. But I couldn't know it without a culture and an exam. As an architect, you have to work as a doctor. It's really the same job. You ask the executives about their business, goals, pain points, challenges. You then have to examine everything they have. Look at what they have. Look at what's working. Look at what's not working. And then you have to make your own diagnosis equivalent. And then you have to build a plan. How do you build the plan? You start with, what is the end goal? This is how you innovate. What is the dream thing that we want? Start there. And then work backwards. In order to achieve this desired end goal, what do we need? What tech is going to get us to that end goal? What people do we need to get in that end goal? And then we select the people, the processes, and that's how we make our clients successful. It's all about a thorough analysis. So hope you guys had a great time. Hope you enjoyed the server versus serverless discussion. We talked about serverless expenses and serverless costs. We talked a little bit about serverless versus monolith. We talked a little bit about cloud cost control. And I had a great time. I hope you guys had a great time too. Please
Definitely
join
did,
us.
always.
please join us on the Elite Cloud Architect Information Session webinar. The link is in the description below. If you're looking to get your first cloud architect job, attend that, but also download the completely free thing we have on how to become a cloud architect and get your first architect job in the description of this video. And while we're at it, I look forward to seeing you in these webinars and on our next show. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Have a good evening.
Take care,
I'm going to
everyone.
get those chicken grits.